Oops, almost forgot. Yes. Hey, good evening, JR. Thank you for being here. I think you're the first one here. You win a biscuit. So let's try and get into this because it's going to be a long one. First of all, if you're watching this as a replay, you might want to jump forward a few minutes because I just got to cover a bit of housekeeping. So I'll have to sort out that blue wrench thing at a later stage. Still going to do it. So that's something on my to-do list. And I want to change my avatar. I'm not happy having AI avatar. Me no likey AI. I'm not artificial. So I want something a bit more handmade. I don't know if I'll revert back to my old one or if I'll try and come up with something new altogether. But I don't like the AI stuff. I think it's a slippery slope of laziness and will eat away at your creativity. I'm someone who likes to inject life into things. So I'll have to redo my thumbnails at some point as well. Now, something a little bit more irritating is I did say I'm not going to be commenting on people's channels or their live streams in the chat box, so I'll have to address this here. But there's someone out there who uttered my name and they want to know how come it's all right for Billy and not for them. So unless you know who this is, this might not make much sense. But they're calling out a double standard. And why is it all right for Billy? Why is it all right for Billy to talk to whoever he wants and do as he please? Within limitations, of course. Well, that's because you're a cuck and I'm me. You're not me. Right? So, you want people to support your channel and you're bitching and complaining, and instead of supporting and saying you want to help, you want me to get shit because you're getting shit. Like, this particular channel has more supporters than me, and I have supported them in the past. So I don't see what they have anything to complain about. Maybe they need to consider what it is they're doing. If you want to, it seems to be an issue around trans, this fascination suddenly. But if you want to go talk about it, go ahead. Stop trying to make it my problem. And would you care? What would you care about what trolls have to say anyway? That's again your problem. So if you can't tell, I find your jab at me disrespectful and I will not tolerate it. You didn't contact me privately and ask for any advice or any questions. Instead, you decided to use my name for your own devices. I'm not some toy you can pluck off the shelf for you to be entitled to have some to get some respect and attention. We are not the same. I earn my way and you are yet to do that. And then you want to call yourself a doctor? You have a rudimentary bias understanding of the field that you're trying to crawl yourself into. And the reason why you might feel like it's a double standard is because you lack discernment. And then you want to talk about covert narcissists and things like this. You're complaining about women in these spaces, and there you are dragging what you label as a covert narcissist in. That's a bit of a silly, stupid thing to be doing, don't you think? You're meant to go no contact if you're so proficient in your understanding. So it makes me think, I reckon you probably fancy this person and expect to elicit them to make you feel better. Now, as for people sitting on the fence and you're not having that, who do you think you are to make demands? So you're not going to force me to pick sides, or I don't, if anyone else, like, shame on you. Basically what I'm saying is tough tits and go fuck your hat. How'd you like them apples, Mr. Gardener? But stick around and let me enlighten you on what it is you're trying to fix, Mr. Captain Saver community. You got big boots to fill if you're going to try and stomp on me. But don't worry, I'll do the work for you, and I'll provide some solutions to help save men that you claim to want to do. Now let's proceed. I apologize for that. Peng, Freebird, namaste. So the writing is on the wall. It's in plain sight. If only you understood the meta communication that was taking place, the double speak, the code language. Now, hopefully, I've warned people enough that this is going to be a tough, bitter pill to swallow, because those who are nervous and too nervous and afraid to hear what's coming, understandably, will, for their own protection, self-preservation, will keep their distance. However, they're going to be in a bit of a scupper, because those of you who are here listening, well done. You're going to have the advantage over them, and they're going to kind of like wish they're going to have to, if they want to stay on top of the ball and be able to pull the wool over your eyes, they're going to have to kind of listen to something that's very uncomfortable for them. So we can have sympathy, shall we, for them. They're between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to come here to listen to this, and I don't blame them, but at the same time, it's going to put them at a disadvantage. So the rest of you that are here are going to be privileged to have some insight and a better understanding. You're going to be equipped. This will help give you better protection. And I'm not saying that you should use it as a weapon, but it will help you navigate these tricky situations. So this is going to be a very uncomfortable thing. And it might be hard for you to take in. So this is not going to be a debate or an argument. And if you must view it in some kind of framework, try to maybe use verification as your context. Let's hope I'm wrong. But then if I am wrong, in some ways, that spells even more problems. Now, I've got quite a lot of notes in front of me, and unfortunately, I'm getting a bit tired of having to organize it. So I apologize if it's a bit clunky. This isn't really about what's right or wrong. It is about restoration, not of the world, but of you. So what's been happening? Some of you have actually been so close, almost hitting the nail on the head. But we might have to do a little bit of a what do you call it? A jump and a leap. So, I don't want to fluff it out and pad it out too much. But look, frustration, resentment, fighting, negativity, blame shifting, hostility, aggression, all that fun stuff. These are coping techniques when we generally don't know how to cope. So I'm going to describe a little bit of we're going to go back in time. How did we get here sort of approach? What has taken place? So it's pretty well acknowledged that these community spaces are created out of trauma. People have had rough times. They've been in a pickle and their world has collapsed. And so they gather. And it is the trauma that is calling for this in-house fighting and other behaviors. But this is part of the overall trauma. And in the process, it feels righteous, yet it leaves people feeling unfulfilled. The hurt and pain is still present, and it is without closure. So the trauma tries to address this by continually to fight. So you get brief moments of what feels and seems like addressing issues and answers and problems, but the unfulfilled emptiness persists. And this parallels with entering stages of grieving. But with grieving process, the end goal is to find that closure. So if you haven't got that, you will continue to grieve. Now, on a societal level, it's pretty well observed that there is inadequate assistance to help men, but this applies to all sorts of communities. So if you find this hard to, you might feel like I'm attacking criticizing the men's community. If it makes you feel more, if it helps you to grasp these concepts, just imagine talking about some other community. Okay, this isn't about singling out the men's community and trying to shame it or criticize it or destroy it or something like that. This is a patterns of behavior that you can note out amongst any of these types of survivor, traumatic, mental health type communities. So there's inadequate help. We see this, there are reports on how everyone's struggling. And what is this help exactly? So in loose sort of terms, you may say it is, we want support. We want someone to be there for us, someone to listen, someone who will accept, someone who will treat you with kindness. Maybe you want protection, you want security, you want some reassurance. And then some of these people might identify changing the laws or issues about the other gender as solving the issues, solving all your problems. You can list out many reasons, but the connection, the thread through all of this is absence with a theme of needs not being met. So communities are generally getting built as the solution. The victimizing aspect isn't a crucial component, but the feeling of being displaced gives it that little bit of extra value. So basically what I'm saying there is if there is a victimizing element, that just makes things more difficult to address. Now, the smart among you might already begin to notice that the direction, the source of the problem is coming from is not the things that I've just stated or listed out, really, or what your emotions say is the remedy. You may even notice all these things are actually things of avoidance and masking. by shifting attention in such a way, you can then, hopefully, you can deny the true reasons from existing and thereby being hurt by them. You'd rather say something else that causes you grief. And in that way, it's kind of like, I will fix this over here instead, and that will somehow fix my personal problems. This just appeared to be doing something in a guise of productivity. This is why walking away from society isn't really making you happy. Now, you might say it does because of denial, but as shown by the continual commentary on it, it shows it's not the case. It shows that you don't really want to have to walk away from society. Walking away from society does not leave you fulfilled or content. You are left unfulfilled. So that's a small little meta communication when you say, like, I'm walking away, is really I would like to walk towards. It's a contradiction, and we're gonna come across a lot of contradictions. And by the way, I have a video. It's about, I don't know, a 10-minute video or whatever, about trauma. If you have watched that video, a lot of understanding the phenomena of trauma will give you a better understanding of what we're discussing here. And if you haven't watched that video, please go watch it, because there's a lot of concepts in there which are applicable to what we're discussing. So what is it you're really walking away from? Is it really walking away from society? No, it's more of a case that you're trying to walk away from your own personal problems, but you can't, because it's like your shadow that keeps following you. You're trying to escape your shadow. And a simple observation of what is discussed enthusiastically and what is avoided serves as an indication of this. I want to be accepted by society, but who I am prevents me. So I'll point at larger society as the problem and why I am not accepted. And in this way, I can be good and I'm not the problem. And also gain significance and a distinct identity, because who I am originally is prevented from existing, therefore is not good enough. So in this way of isolation, I can adopt a morally superior stance and say, I am not the problem, it is everyone else that is the problem. Now, I'm not saying society and external factors aren't also a problem, but they're not going to be able to be dealt with whilst there is an internal problem persisting. And we'll come back to the external factors later on. So I see Primo, I see Tim, good to see you, gentlemen. Johnny Midnight, good to see you. If I've missed any, Ian, Sam, Primo, good evening, everyone. Thank you for all being here. Okay, so the next section, a sanctuary built from pain. I mean, what else is it built from? Kicks and giggles. So where do the injured people go, given that there is inadequate help? Well, given what we've described here, this would technically mean that communities of this nature are a trauma response. They are places where people go to figure it out for themselves. There is no real guide. There is no real professionals. It's uncharted territory, which means kind of like the blind leading the blind, trial and error. And to credit, done pretty well. But then this gives us it with a better understanding of how trauma operates. This helps to explain the characteristics of the group, of the herd. So we're going to be entering like group psychology instead of individual psychology. So self-esteem is outsourced as part of this trauma, which the tribe, the community tribe, is more than happy to take care of for the individual. Now, for that person, well, basically what I'm saying is for you, me, whoever, we're relieved to hear that. You'll be taken care of. We will listen to you. You will be accepted. You'll be loved. You'll be welcomed and all this good stuff. It all seems good. However, with this arrangement, it is one of dependency. Therefore, again, like if it's a trauma response, if it's a community that is built out of a trauma response, it is therefore technically not a healthy environment by definition. These spaces are not a place where you find yourself. At best, what they are really, and what they should be intended for, is to help you get started with your self-care. It is after that process that you start to find yourself. But that's still just an introduction. It's not really a body of experience. So these spaces are basically, it's been described as rehabs, as clinics, as AA groups and things like that. So this shouldn't be, what I'm describing shouldn't be alien concepts. You should be like, I'm beginning to see now. But people don't treat them as such. They're set up as a dependency. You will never leave. You will be dependent. So what ends up happening is many treat the space, whatever community, they end up treating that as the end point, the goal. They have reached nirvana. And if these spaces are safe spaces, they're providing you some identity, they're providing you with their protection, they're giving you all that good stuff, and you also don't want to be abandoned on your own again, because you know how painful that was, then why would you ever leave? So you can see how that ties in with the dependency. However, these spaces have their limitations. They're not supposed to be like that. So they are not sustainable in nature. So this is why if you end up holding a community above yourself, you're waving the flag above your head or a crown or something like that. Intentionally or not, it will keep you down in a place of trauma, because it is a trauma environment. And the regime that it's created, which is a form of psychosis, isn't supposed to change. It's meant to keep an equilibrium. So again, refer to the trauma video about how the trauma combined with your ego isn't really your friend. It's happy to lie to you. It's happy to change whatever narrative to keep you compliant. And it also doesn't really care about your quality of living. Its job is to keep you alive and protected. This is also a survival defense mechanism. This isn't a quality of life community. this is just basically trying to keep you alive as best as it can. So we cannot be angry or fault it for doing these things. But there lies the problem, which is if people are wanting to change and you're in a space which inhibits any change from taking place, then you're stuck. Now, it's kind of funny. Again, we hit the nail on the head. But it's so on the nose we don't see it. Like we even use terms like sphere. What is a sphere? It's a bubble. Ever heard about people living in their own bubble? A bubble of protection. So to further emphasize how dependent and you can't really let this go, in the end you might become trapped, is for a lot of people, they have already experienced the pain of things that we would call things like the blue pill bubble bursting. So you know how painful a bubble bursting is, and you don't want to be wrong again. And the trauma will say to you, or your ego will say to you, if you stay in here, we'll all look after you, and the bubble won't pop. You've got to keep this bubble, you've got to maintain the bubble and keep it pristine, because it is perfect. It's a perfect bubble. So we can see how it's limiting. And if this bubble and this environment and how it's set up is limiting, it therefore also limits you. It will keep you alive, but it won't allow you to live your life. So essentially what I'm also describing is a creation of the shared fantasy victims have with narcissists. That's just another way of conceptualizing what we're discussing here. So it's kind of like the love bombing is part of that process. And in modern times, with how relationships are nowadays, they're not providing enough sustenance for the narcissist. So their strategy is being extrapolated on a larger scale now. The relationship is with the community instead of a intimate partner. But this isn't necessarily how the community begin, but this formula of dependency creates a huge amount of vulnerability. So that becomes a fertile ground for narcissist type people to easily slide in and take over operations. And I would describe that as a cafeteria of supply. So no wonder there are issues of gatekeeping. No wonder there are people talking about wolves in sheep's clothing. You're kind of putting yourself on the dinner table as the buffet. So that's a sort of another contradiction where a lot of the times these communities think that there's a strength because they're in numbers, but however, that opens up a whole bunch of other vulnerabilities and actually makes them more susceptible to being messed around with. So then no wonder the space, the environment becomes very complex and multi-layered. But we'll talk more about the narcissists and predators with the external factors later on in this conversation. All right. Have a little pause for thought. Shinobi One, great to see you here, sir. Okay, let me have a sip of my coffee. Okay. Okay, so this next part is going to be a bit quirky. Crowd psychology. I wasn't too sure what the best way of phrasing this is. There's lots of ways people describe it. The hive mind, herd mentality. But I kind of wanted to go with this idea of an entity, this strange creature that has taken on a life of its own, a creature with no physical form. And again, this would be kind of covered in the trauma video that I did separately, which describes trauma as taken on a life. It takes on its own personality. So this entity is kind of like a merger of all the community, the members within a community. They speak with one mind, one voice. And the members, they're feeding it. They're the ones who are kind of, they grew it. And so the tribe is above the self, above the individual. So the tribe rules over you. And as we've covered, we understand why, because it is the one, that's because you are dependent on the tribe to take care of you. So you are beneath it. And we don't notice because it's got no physical form, so we don't notice it, but we have named it a few different things. Some of you have called it, for example, a movement or a philosophy or a lifestyle. This is the name you have given to this entity. It is your God. It is your world. And you want to keep it alive, so you worship it. And as it's your world, and as you're giving it your life, it's taking your life from you, you are living under it in a state of being unalive. That's kind of why, there's talking about we're saving lives, or this community saved my life, yet it seems to me, if you look around, everyone seems to be feeling dead inside. So it's a weird state of physically, you might still be alive, but spiritually and mentally, you're gone. And remember, this bubble, like, it needs to be maintained, because if the bubble pops and dies, you die with it. So people, the members, are forced in a way, due to their dependency and emotional needs, to secure this delusion of safety. Because if it truly worked, there wouldn't be any need to be chanting affirmations of how wonderful it is. You say, like, yeah, but it saved my life. Well, are you saying that you constantly need saving? So we say these little things and we don't realize there's a lot behind the words that are said. It saved my life. You're basically saying I'm a dependent now. Like if you had an accident and the doctor, like, the ambulance was called out to you, they saved your life, great. You go off and live the rest of your life, right? You don't stay in the ambulance simply because it saved your life. You're not indebted to it. And there are other kind of sort of confessions in a way, where maybe you might say, no, I mean, I want to save, like, I'm part of the community because I want to save lives. Which, what does that translate? It's me that wants to be saved. It's my life I want to be saved. You know, I talk about suicide numbers because it is me who is thinking about suicide. I don't want to be one of those numbers. Or maybe someone might say, as long as one person is saved, then it's worth it. Well, who is that one we're talking about? It's you. You're talking about yourself. As long as I can be saved as that one, then it's worth it. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying, I mean, it is worth it, but there's an element of dishonesty, and that's ingrained throughout. Why? Because it is a structure that is built from trauma. Trauma is not honest to you. Which is a very uncomfortable thing to be saying, because that means before even uttering a word in a community space, it is already set up to be an inauthentic, dishonest environment where people say the truth matters, but that's a contradiction. You know, and it's also, besides like this whole saving thing, this self-grandizing, as if like, why do you feel like you've got the power to save lives? You know, but and so people need to learn to listen better. They need to learn to listen to their inner child, their true self. If you really want to be saved, if you really want to save lives, that's the life that needs saving, not the trauma. And how do I know it says these things? Because it tells me, and I listen. That's what I mean by the writing is on the wall. This isn't my imagination. This isn't, I mean, I wish it was. This is simply just listening very carefully to what is being said. Not the words that are being said, but the concepts and context of what is being said. So it's all around you if you just learn to look properly. So that's the setup, and we can see that this entity, the tribe, unfortunately, it might have good intentions initially, but the way it tries to protect you from the pain of life is by removing you from life. That's not really saving you. So where did this all go wrong? I mean, remember, this is the survival mechanisms that have served its purpose, but were never deactivated when they should have been. So we're going to go further back in time now to the day of innocence, when it came to an end. Talking about usually childhood. The day of innocence is when you don't have any responsibilities. You know, you can enjoy yourself carefree. When that came to an end, there was supposed to be a point of maturation. But how do you do that now when you don't know how? So this younger, innocent version of yourself, the true self, your inner child, was too weak and unable to cope. It was not trusted to be responsible enough to take care of itself. This is why the ego remained in control. And so being highly vulnerable and unable to deal with the pressure, this true self is placed in a vault. It's buried away inside you deep for protection in the shadow that keeps following you around. But because you placed it in this out of reach place, it also makes you vulnerable. And again, this is another reason why a community or tribe or acquiring a intimate partner, not only is it alluring for the reasons listed out earlier, but it's actually a necessity. So with no other options available to you, being vulnerable and highly dependent, people mold, they contort themselves in whatever way required to be accepted, because it's a necessity to be part of, to gain protection. But if you're molding yourself in ways that are not true to who you are, and the true version of you is locked for their own protection, then this is another reason why when you show up, you're already you're showing up as an inauthentic version of yourself. So no wonder, therefore, it's hard for people to be honest about their personal issues, because, sorry, my kid is yawning or something. I don't know if you heard that. So people show up inauthentic. Sorry, maybe lose chain of thought. They turn up inauthentic, and the dishonesty isn't because necessarily they want to be liars, but it's part of that protection of, because if you were to be honest, you are exposing the true self to sensitive environments. So to protect it, you need to, it's like coping again. Lying is a way to protect, is to control. So it serves that function. So this is another reason why it's hard to get to the bottom of things and help men's issues, because in order to do that, you would have to remove the layers of protection, exposing the deep core wound issues. And you're not too sure, because you can't really rely on this weak version of yourself, and especially how much time has elapsed, if they would manage to do it. So you double down, you deny. Now, in more ideal circumstances, what would happen with children growing up is that they would have parents and an environment which teaches them how to maturize and individuate. The parents give approval, and that allows the true self and the child to emerge and grow with its confidence. But that's the missing link. And that child would grow up with healthy boundaries as a result, and they would be able to protect themselves because they have the confidence and fortitude to realize that the world isn't as dangerous as they thought, and they can deal with it. That's the where did it all go wrong error, is the panic, the ego survival defense mechanism was activated hastily. So this is a spiraling of problems, because if you have that missing link, the self identity and esteem hasn't been properly constructed, then you can see why there would be identity issues later on in life, especially if you're locking away your true identity and what you're living as currently is an inauthentic, sort of like an imposter version of you, a substituted version of you, which is created from, okay, this is going to be a different stream, but this false self is a fantasy version of you with trying to navigate in the world of reality. It's not compatible, and this is why the false version will not work long term. But you're stuck because you can't use the real version of you because you haven't used it in all these years. It's atrophied. You'll be lucky if it's still there. And sometimes these parents, they were absent, but maybe they were there, and the point is, we can't really blame our upbringing, our parents, our environment necessarily for these failures, because no one knew it was going to happen, really. And blaming external factors like that isn't really going to help with the here and now, with what people are dealing with personally. But you can see how the intention of the community idea is to be that substitute for the parents and the environment, that missing link. And this is the glue that keeps people together. But without the awareness, and things go unchecked. And again, we can use examples of, look at how parents, if they don't allow their children to properly individuate, they end up becoming the devouring mother type. They keep them in the nest, they clip their wings, they stunt the development of the child. They turn them into caretakers or slaves or son husbands. They mollycoddle these children. So it's the same kind of dynamic. You have parents who are meant to protect you and look after you and help raise you. That's great. But there's a moment in time where they need to back off. Same with this sort of tribe community philosophy of sorts. But they're not backing off, because without members, the entity that is the tribe collapses. So the tribe as a life form of itself needs to keep those, it's the tyrannical parents that needs to keep the children disabled and prevent them from leaving. The parents need the children just as much as the children need the parents. Codependence. So this is why people in the tribe, in the community, they are unable to individuate. It's an impossibility. You cannot individuate if you want to be part of the tribe. Not this type of setup, not this type of tribe. A tribe that is built not to deal with trauma, but is created from trauma. The trauma prevents you from having your independence, because then your ego defense system is like, you don't need me anymore. That's the end of my life. So it keeps you under their thumb. But it's not going to it's openly say this to you, but it's happening. So going back to this sort of missing link, then what ends up trying to take place is artificially overcorrecting, with things that should already have been known. But with this enthusiasm, like this gusto approach, that's a sign of how much things have messed up. And as a result of that, people use regret selfishly as motivation to rectify these mistakes. We make the young, the next generation, the inexperienced, we make them responsible for the mistakes that they haven't even committed yet. And it reveals, as much as we want to say that we are healed and like to think we are healthy people, we're actually far more wrong than we realize. We are severely injured. It is the future generations who have the opportunity not to experience the pain and injuries that we may have, if only we give them the chance. And we're not doing that. They are not the children that never got to be. We are. The next generation are the children who will carry our shame. Now, if generational trauma is the philosophy, it needs to stop. So, in addressing these things, having lost our way intentionally, like it's part of the trauma process to make you look in the wrong places, because it doesn't want to be discovered, because if you discover it, you would prevent it. The trauma wants you to be sick, just like how Big Pharma wants to make you sick so that you're a lifelong customer. Same kind of thing. So the cure, if there is one, will be in how we parent. We need to look at parenting and understand how children develop. Never mind blaming the world or whatever it is, or other people within the communities. These are distractions. These are red herrings. But in order to parent, that means you need the responsibility of yourself. So there's plenty of these kind of catch-22s, because the whole point of this trauma, this paradise, this nirvana, this utopia, is to avoid the responsibility of having to grow up. It's so that you can stay as Peter Pan, the child that never grew, the child who is still innocent. That's why you all feel like you're innocent. You don't want the responsibility. So how do you self-parent if you don't want to be responsible? You can't do it. But the clues, again, it's a writing on the wall. The clues are in the trauma itself, not the narrative built from the trauma. Because if I were to believe these narratives, for example, I'll put it this way: I will not be telling my daughter that she's going to become a whore. Thank you. Because that's what people are saying. That's passing on generational trauma. That's denying children from being children. My kids' school do this all the time. They need to fight racism as if they're the ones being racist. They need to save the planet. It's like, what? They're just kids. Why is it the kids have to clean up the planet, pick up syringes on the beaches? The kids didn't put the syringe, obviously the kids, but there they are feeling like they feel guilty, and it's their responsibility when it's wrong. This is abusing children. This idea, I'm going off on a tangent here, off script. This idea that we need to tell kids and warn them, try and red pill them earlier, you're abusing children. You are taking away their childhood. The exact same thing that happened to you. And you expect them to be free? Sorry. So if you want to save children, don't give them your bullshit. Let them be kids. Then they can complete their childhood properly, and it will come to a natural closure. That child will have its child life. It will maturize then. But if you intervene with your kerfuffles, then you disrupt that process, and the child will never it will never maturize. It will never individuate. And I don't want to listen to this. Yeah, but they're being indoctrinated by computers or whatever. So this gives me the excuse to preemptively brainwash the children before anyone else brainwashes them. Learn how to parent. And the same applies to your brothers and sisters and your peers. This is going to sound corny, but learn to give people the love, the actual, the acceptance, unconditional love. That's another thing you'll have to look into. That is missing. Give them that. That's what they need. That's what the kids need. They need unconditional love. That was taken away. That was missing. So that's the cure. Not giving them your fears and your traumas. Now, why is it we can't let go? We kind of already touched it. This might be a little bit of a repetition. Let me just have another sip of the coffee. It's kind of getting cold there. All right, so okay, so this is actually a little bit of a repeat of what I've already said, but I'll skim over it. So more reasons why you won't let go, because you've already experienced the death of the dream many times probably, and you don't want to experience it again. But this time you feel so backed into a corner that now you, having taken the red pill, you think you've learned from your mistakes, and so you won't be wrong again. You found the answer this time, and therefore that's now you're enlightened, now you're righteous. But then ask yourself, why do you still keep experiencing problems then if you've got it all figured out? Doesn't quite tally up. But these mistakes, these aren't really your fault. You're doing the best you can, and it's a lot to take in. Like, this isn't normal stuff that should be happening. Like, well, I'll probably list it out later on, so I won't say it now. So, because of that fear of being wrong and not being accepted, now that you've got hold of something that you think is right, the solution and answer, it prevents you from abandoning it. You got, finally you got something to hold on to, and you're going to have a death grip on it. That's why it's so hard, because to let go is, what's the option then? It's to not survive. So the ego and the trauma pump in with a lot of pride a false value. A bias, confirmation bias, if you will. And build in a anxiety of abandonment. So it feels good. It feels so good, like a drug, that if you were to go your own way, then you wouldn't feel confident enough to be okay by yourself. It would trigger abandonment. Your anxiety will shoot through the roof. You would have to be responsible. Like, life would be hard all of a sudden. So there's a whole bunch of problems that prevent you, that encourage you not to let go. But sometimes people do. They do manage to let go. They go there. They say bye to the community or whatever. And in response, the other members, who are probably more dependent than the one who left, will be a bit snidey and maybe say, well, this isn't the place for you. Like, as if, like, what's that supposed to mean? You mean you're not good or sick enough to be one of us? So this landscape, with all this turmoil and drama, it becomes the new normal. It becomes the new stable ground, the consistency in knowing that things are forever inconsistent. That contradiction. Peace, calmness, quietness is unsettling, because it's not to be trusted. Something's up. Paranoia comes with the anxiety. So you feel better. You feel relieved when people are fighting. You feel better when there's drama, because you can trust on that. You can count and depend on those types of things. You feel better knowing that there's backstabbing going on, because that means you are right. Aha, I knew you would backstab me. I am right. I knew I was right. I'm always right. You see? If no one's backstabbing, if no one is smear campaigning, if no one's doing any fuckery, too unsettling. So all this kind of talk about, I just want peace, I just want calm and quiet and tranquil, I want to walk out in nature or whatever it is. These are, again, dishonest things, because why don't you have it then? Why? Because because it's not only is it unsettling, but it's kind of like it's a toxic. It gets labeled as the ego defense trauma doesn't like it and says it's bad. fighting good because I am being put to use. I am significant and relevant because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to fight. I'm here to keep you surviving. So negativity and fighting is good, and good stuff is bad. But these claims of ambitions, etc., they need to be kept at arm's length, because otherwise, this whole model of the landscape of the community collapses. Because imagine if everyone actually reached their ambition, no one would be here. You see, we need to stunt people's development and keep them as children. We can't allow them to individuate and be successful. So, and if you're even more honest, this model, this way it's set up, is exactly what you want as well. You're not as much of a victim as you like to think you are. This is a transaction. This is an agreement. You say to trauma, please look after me. Trauma says, okay, I'll look after you, but I need you to sacrifice the rest of your life, kind of thing. You know, your lived experience. I need you to be under my tyranny. And you say, okay. So both parties agree to this. Just like with the narcissist and the victim, both parties agree to this transaction. So this environment that's created now, today, is a reconstruction of the trauma that time forgot. That's another reason why it kind of, you naturally click with it. This isn't the first time we've met. It's kind of like we've met in a previous life. This is kind of like PTSD. CPTSD. Being reincarnated in a new form, a new package. The mechanisms, the structure is very similar. So you're caught in a loop because trauma has no closure. Cycle behavior. We're repeating history, making the same mistakes over and over again. We've been here before. But on this occasion, this is a reconstruction made from a contribution of other people's traumas. So it's a kind of entity with dissociative identity disorder. It has multiple personalities contributing to this singular entity, hive mind that I'm describing. So when you look at it from the outside, if you were to look at it, kind of thing, you would see facets of people's personality, like a sprinkle of someone here, a sprinkle of someone there. Yeah. And that's why you might have that kind of eerily expression, because it's an emotional loop that it feels so familiar. That's why you might say you're right at home. This place feels like my home. In a strange kind of funny way, it is. It's a reconstructed. It's your trauma. It's your nightmare that's come back. All right, take another little pause. We'll do these in little chunks because this is a kind of hard stuff. I hope you're finding it all right. All right, I see Sam. You say, I don't know. I'm really militant about not being in a victim mentality. Well, the thing is though, Sam, subconsciously, these types of communities, the ego given with the ego, it kind of embraces a victim mentality. It might not be so obvious and direct. Imagine it's more kind of a thin layer that's been spread out. It's like a subtle layer. If we're lucky, we might actually, I don't know if, do I have it? I've got so much notes that maybe I kind of mention them more. So as you would imagine, the ego likes to tell you stories. It's trying to get you to depart from reality and live in its protective bubble in fantasy. So narratives are part and parcel of that, I'm afraid. So narratives are told. And sometimes, there's many types, but sometimes these narratives are based in like the self-help genre, or maybe they're a bit inspirational, positive, or something like that. And given the criteria that, hang on, this is there is a thread of dishonesty. Like, I'm not necessarily being like saying like malicious type of stuff, but this kind of like, hang on, you're appearing as a false self. So there's no way you're going to actually be giving me accurate, honest answers. You're trying to hide wounds, so it's no surprise. It's like in the morning, you see someone at work, they're having a rough day. How you doing? And they say, I'm fine. It's like, they're not fine. They just told you that to get rid of you. So they're lying to you. It's like a white lie kind of thing. But so this self-help, inspirational, positive type stuff in a not so direct way is actually a kind of virtue signal. And it might not be deliberate, it might not be like going out there, they want to virtue signal. You might not even be aware they're doing it. That's the thing, because a lot of this stuff will be subconscious with a lack of self. Like, the person in the driving seat isn't really you, it's your ego tricking you, thinking that it's you who is thinking. Because there are many instances where people will say something and that is not really coming from them. Those are words coming from their ego. Their ego is doing the talking. So where are they? Well, they are locked away with the inner child, the true self, in the dark. They're asleep. Remember, we're the walking dead. So this is going to be a bit cuckoo sounding, but you are not supposed to be your ego. So these self-help things, anyway, this inspirational stuff, it might sound like, cognitively speaking, it might sound like, yes, bang on, those are exactly the words you should be saying. However, there's a sense of hollowness. They're empty words. Now, people who have actually done self-work, they may appreciate these kind of things. They'd be like, yes, it does, I can relate to those. I can co-sign on that. Yes, that is stuff like, yes, you should give yourself self-love. But people who have done work on themselves don't need to hear that. Which means that these kinds of narratives are aimed at people who need it, but are not in a position to properly internalize it correctively or constructively. Like, it's not the well good intentions aren't going to reach its target because of their defense system preventing it penetrating. So a clue to how you might notice this will be when you hear something like you watch a motivational video and you feel good temporarily, but soon afterwards you feel worse and even more in despair. You'd think, why is that the case? And this is the disparity between cognitive and emotional understanding. Because with with trauma in the driving seat of your self-care, and with trauma saying to you that, hey, I got this, I will look after us, don't you worry, just make sure you give me all the controls and power and I'll take care of you. It rejects any help being given to it. Why would it need help if it's in control? This is why it looks at help as a threat. It's like, oh, you want to take over, do you? You want to make me redundant? No way. You're the enemy. So when you try and give out self-help in such a manner, or when you receive self-help in such a manner, the trauma is already in place, rejects it. And this is why you're feeling more in despair, because you want that help, but the trauma won't allow you to take it. And with this tyrant of an ego in place, it's not going to help you try and find some kind of resolution. Which means you instead of receiving love, your trauma interjects and tells you off and says, hey, you need to suppress your annoying true emotions because you're going to get us into trouble here. So you're depowered, your trauma depowers you to prevent you from uprising. And if the community is an extension of this trauma, it works in the same way, where it says, hey, everyone, you need to cut it out with this riffraff stuff and just conform and do as you're told. Stop trying to get help or get too big for your britches, because this ain't gonna work. So not only are you turning up a little bit disingenuous, but the tribe and the trauma suppress you from even attempting to want to be your true self. Another contradiction. So that means that these narratives, pretty much all of them, I would think, within these communities are designed in such a way, because they're coming as an extension from trauma. They're designed to support that trauma and not to support self-love in any way. This is kind of like doubling down. This is trying to spellbind you, trying to hypnotize yourselves with your own narrative to make it more believable, with affirmations, and we'll find some statistics, find whatever. This is just more to add to the bias. So the things that would genuinely actually help are attacked by trauma's antibodies. Now, as a possible solution, if you're able to recognize the grieving access and work your way through that, you might be able to, instead of your trauma reassuring you, you'd be reassuring your trauma and saying, it's okay. It's like you'd say to your ego, hey, it's okay. I know you're there trying to protect me, but you've become too tyrannical and you've taken over my life. I got this now. You can step down. But for that to happen, you would have to go through the grieving process. So before any self-love stuff, inspirational, positive stuff, you would have to begin like grieving process before that. And oh yeah, I do have something here that relates to the victimhood. So when we talk about self-love, under with a lens of when we talk about self-love through the filter of trauma, what does that translate to? It's code doublespeak for victimhood. Self-love has been converted through the filter of trauma to encourage and facilitate victimhood. And as a result, you wallow in self-pity. That's not self-love. And become debilitated. Again, that's not self-love. And you will say things, because I feel discontent, I am therefore a failure. What's there to feel love about? And that's not you talking, that's your trauma trying to rationalize why this self-love isn't working. Because what's there to feel love about? Right? I'm a failure, the trauma is saying to you. You don't deserve love. So that's why the self-love you're hearing isn't going to work, because it is being filtered through a lens of trauma. You have to address the trauma first. You can't love yourself if you are trauma won't allow it. So you have to bring that to a closure. And so not only is self-love turned into victimhood, but that also becomes a tyrannical reminder used by trauma that is based on the conditions that were never met to further keep you in place. I'm undeserving because I value victimhood. Victimhood is what is my version of self-love, and I'd rather be a victim than actually feel loved. Okay. This idea of growing communities. Oh, it's wonderful. It's growing. We're worldwide now. These are an alarming sign of societal decay. We shouldn't really be celebrating that there are people in desperate need of attention, survival, and distress. And isn't it wonderful that it's growing worldwide? No. I'm not saying that you haven't had hard times, or you were hard done by, but or that they shouldn't exist. Like, there is an important need to have these communities. I strongly support the concept of it. It is the entity that I reject. There is a serious need to have these communities, but if they're growing, that is not a good sign. Okay, so we've covered a couple of these characteristics. So there's high levels of neuroticism and obviously, low self-esteem. But these conditions create competition amongst the other communities in the sector. And the competition is required in order to have a distinction, so that it's like to stand out from the rest, because there's a need to be noticed. And with that creates a flare of elitism, like we're the the most virtuous community. We're the superior community. And entry is looked at as, instead of a kind of sombering thing, you know, it's like if someone new came along, really we should be feeling sorry for them, but instead it's looked at as a prize. It's like, well done, you've gained access, you're one of us now. It's like, oh god. You know, it's like, I'm sorry your life has been hard, and like it's lucky that you've come to this place. It's a shame that you've had to go through so much and ended up here. You know, it's a telling sign. But yeah, these communities are in competition with one another. I mean, look at like Me Too, labeled on, like, don't forget me too. You know, they don't want to be left out of the competition. And so with this elitism and competition, attributes are bolted on to elevate the victim / slave morality. So that's looking at some Nietzsche. Okay, so people talk about tribalism, you know, again, survival mode. Tribalism encourages aggressiveness, which impulsivity, you know, there's a whole bunch of other kind of things, but basically shoot first, ask questions later. That now we're introducing cognitive dissonance. Well, we're not really, I mean, cognitive dissonance was in the mix from the get-go, but we're only now just talking about cognitive dissonance. So we can see basically that this problem is so multi-layered. No wonder it's a very difficult one to objectively see what's going on, especially if you're in the thick especially if you're in the group in the thick of it. You're not going to be able to see all this stuff. And if you like, you're not going to know how it all connects and how it interferes with one another. And as you can imagine, with all this going on, this creates hypersensitivity, it creates vigilance, to constantly monitor the environment. So people have itchy fingers. And again, this isn't something to be really proud of. Like, some people will make remarks like, oh, my intuition tells me this, like I can just read a room. Well, that's not really, I mean, I know you're trying to use it as like a superior kind of, wow, look at me, I can read a room. But the reason why you can read a room is because you're so terrified of your survival in jeopardy that you've had to become hypervigilant. You've become neurotic. But the kind of sentiment, the feeling that people will have is a sort of continual, like, are we safe? Are we all right? Like, what is happening? And as a result, that means you need constant reassurance, affirmations to tell you that everything is going to be all right. And that can come in the form of someone being executed, you know, like, we got them. Phew, I feel a lot better now. Like, we found a target to attack. Phew, that makes me feel a lot more secure. So affirmations and reassurance comes in many forms. And this is, if we go back to the very beginning of this stream, we're talking about what are we're describing the reasons why people join communities. And when we crystallize it down to its purest forms, it's avoidance and reassurance. So we're looking at neuroticism and anxiety. Wait, no, that's part of neuroticism. Neuroticism and psychopathy. Don't jump at these words. neuroticism is like anxiety. The avoidance will tie into there, and sorry, the reassurance would tie into neuroticism, and the reassurance, what was the other one I just said? Avoidance would tie into psychopathy. Is the detachment from reality. We have detached from reality. We're in a state of psychosis, mass psychosis, and some of you wanted to laugh at the idea. It's like, you're being ridiculous. It's like, no, I'm not joking. And because everything is so up in the air, trust becomes a major issue. Part of survival mode. So the neuroticism, the anxiety produces paranoia. That's why a lot of you are like, oh, I'm being censored. The CIA are watching me. I mean, come on now. Detached from reality much. If they were watching, they'd probably be laughing. Soon I'll start getting accusations that I'm one of the CIA. Like, bring it on. CIA want to hire me? No problem. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying there aren't incidents of like people getting a knock at the door, but it's the escalation, the out of proportion, the histrionic elements sort of flying in. But yeah, so the paranoia further fuels and increases victimhood. And this part of the vicious cycler feedback loop becomes created, bouncing backwards and forwards from having to avoid problems to having to need to be reassured about them. And then this therefore creates a contradiction with the idea of going your own way, because with this regime, like, going your own way is recovery. It's to heal. It's a solo journey, which has a direction. But this is the way it's set up is to have no direction. Bad. It's meant to be circular. It's meant to be a loop of assurance and avoidance. So there can't really be a go in your own way then. You can't have an individual. And when I say, like a solo journey with direction, I don't mean going back to the plantation or something, But this is where the community is. This is where its assistance should come to a halt. Sometimes the best way of helping someone is to not help. Continually to provide help starts to backfire and hinder them. But so people can help you, people can assist you, but for things to actually change and get better, this looping around this carousel. It's kind of funny that we'll talk about women being on the carousel, but we're on a carousel of our own. But this ride will have to come to an end. The people that can help you, they can't do it for you. And this is the crux of it all, where it's kind of like, because many people don't want it to end. They want it to go around. Because their survival is anchored into it. It would kill them. They're now on life support from this dependency. And a lot of what I've just described is also fits in with borderline. Like if we look at the model of borderline, a lot of it can help us to better understand what is being described here. It doesn't mean you're a borderline. I'm just saying, if you look at the the constructs and the cycles, the patterns. It will help to. It's relatable. So we were talking about, because individualism is a big part, like a recognition, because MGTOW wants respect, it wants acknowledgement. Men need to have their voices heard. So we need to have, there's this area of individualism we're going to have to discuss. So without individualism, you can't actualize. You can't turn up as your own self. There is, you can't form your own sense of self. You have no proper form. You have no parameters. You have no agency. You know this sort of stuff. Like, what does individualism define it? But with a mixture of people, each trying to claim an identity of their own within a tribe, that means the tribe is constantly shifting and needing to redefine its terms. Notice how many times people talk about what is this or what is that, define it. Well, there you are, because it's full of people who are all trying to have, who each have fragmented sense of self, a fragmentation of their identity. People don't really know who they are, and they're all coming together trying to cobble together something. So there can't really be a solidified definition for anything. The goalpost keeps moving, and that's also part of the trauma mechanism. It needs to keep moving as well, because if there were a definitive answer, that would be a closure bad. So the tribe is constantly shifting and needing to be redefined. Again, making it, I mean, we've already described it as a not healthy environment, but we're now saying that this is a unstable environment. How are you going to get your footing if the ground beneath you is constantly unstable? But given that, but this is something that we can actually factor. So considering the sort of what the function of this community tribe should be, like people trying to find themselves and figure things out, then we can have a little bit of tolerance here, and it should be expected that there will be confusion amongst people. There are no professionals. Where people have the outside world has shunned whatever. There's inadequate help and support, so it's not surprising that things would be unstable. So we can have we can grant some leeway, but some, please, but the trouble here, though, is a paradox becomes created, whereby for an individual identity to become cemented within a person and they become self-sufficient, it separates them from the tribe. Now, they might not leave the tribe, but as far as the tribe is concerned, they will look at this as a step towards abandonment and betrayal. How dare you individuate? What, you think you're better than the rest of us? But isn't the sort of motto is to try and help people to individuate? So it's a paradox. The brochure says we'll help you individuate. You do that, and now your betrayal. And if this were to happen if too many people, I mean, already mentioned this earlier, like if too many people do this, then the tribe dissipates. So this shows why there's a need to have an influx of new members. And as part of the tribe itself cannot provide sovereign identity, but it needs to claim that it does. And the members need to remain they need to remain pliable or malleable with no right to their autonomy. You're not allowed to have independence. You're not entitled to that. And this is twisted into a bargaining chip, because if you're sort of like non-existent in this sense, because you're not an actualized person, you don't have any form of parameters, you're a blur with poor boundaries, there's no distinction in you, then the bargaining chip is that, well, then you can easily move the goalpost. You won't be responsible. All with a simple little reinvention, a reiteration. And so this ties in with the avoidance that we were describing, which means, therefore, that the idea of protection, which is avoidance is a form of protection, so or evasion, avoid accountability, avoid responsibility, these sort of things, that's more important and valuable than identity. You would rather be protected than have an identity. So with these reiterations, these reinvention or revisions, this kind of keeps the ball rolling, and these are like measures that help to regulate and promote that dependency, and in turn depower members from ever upright, like be more like us. But by turning members into carbon copied drones of one another with an illusion of individuality, helps to keep them subdued and disorientated, which maintains the tribe's overall control and stops not only are the members trying to survive, but the tribe as an entity is also trying to survive. So some things that will help to reassure will be the strength in numbers. So this is why we need to recruit. We need to have new members. We need more people to be vulnerable and mentally ill. We don't want healthy people here, because healthy people will disturb the equilibrium. We need unhealthy people. So strength in number, peer pressure, and these narratives and things, these different little elements here and there. This helps keep cohesion. But it's a type of cohesion because of the way it's been formed. And with the survival element, like, there's people can't trust one another. Fighting is a good thing, and having civil wars and all this sort of stuff, alliances, it puts a strain, even though people are cohesive, they kind of need to be, it places a strain on harmony. And all of this stuff that I'm describing is all subconscious. That's the kind of crazy part, that not a single one person is sitting down mapping it all out. This is all being driven by the ego, the trauma, and emotional needs. It's in the subconscious, it's in the shadow. If you were to be aware of it, then that is a problem. So you have to be subconscious to it. You have to be asleep. And it's directed by this natural need for structure, or the reassurance. Structure is reassurance. So an analogy here that will help you understand, well, like, how can this, that sounds a bit too bizarre. Like, think of all right, don't be offended by this. Think of how a ant colony works, how it forms. Like, no one ant speaks a word, yet they all become organized. It's that kind of natural organizing structure, even though it's an unstable one. Now, you might argue with me and insist that, no, I see people as individual people. You can't be talking about me. Okay, fine, great, wonderful. Then you won't have a problem then. But you might insist that you see people as individual people. But by definition of what I've been describing here, due to trauma and things like this, with a lack of sense of self, with a lack of your own identity, because your identity is with the true self, and what you're believing is the lie. The trauma is telling you the false self is real. So that might not be words spoken by you, that might be words spoken by the trauma, saying, that's your trauma talking, saying that you can indeed see separate people, individuals, because it's not possible due to trauma's integration and the conformity. Like, in order to see individuals, to recognize them, can only come after a person has built their own identity and has their own self-esteem, because they can see themselves, thus be able to distinguish themselves from other people. And it's through in is and it is that which then grants security and the ability to be tolerant of one another. So the whole point of group identity, it tries to prevent that by enmeshing everyone into a symbiosis, the hive mind. We are the whoever. Yeah. Can't we all just get along? Well, no, because without the mentioned characteristics, there would always be people stepping on each other's toes. So fighting is pretty much, I think, the only thing that can, like, quell this, because everyone is arguing they're trying to, each drone is selfishly trying to take control of the tribe so that they follow their definition. So there's lots of disputes going on, and fighting can help, for the time being, quell those disputes happening, so people can get along, because the focus is elsewhere, and that's another avoidance characteristic. And this isn't just limited to the group, the main, kind of group I'm referring to. This is with all progressive type groups. There's a fellow who likes to mention the Great Re, and that is a reflection of that pain and struggle. It is the cry for help, or lack thereof, because this cohesion is hard to. It's very draining on each of the members of the colony, because they're all having to sacrifice themselves to keep the monster of an entity alive. So it works for the time being, but long term, this is where some of you recognize it as the great like the collapse. It's because this machine is not sustainable. Like, this is externalizing the locus of control. You can only do that so much before it comes crashing down, where the rubber meets the road. The only real, so there needs to be some self-responsibility, some self-accountability, self-ownership. And that is going in the direction of like a solution here. But that is something which the tribe is not built to provide, unfortunately. Rather, it is the alternative of having to do that. So everyone, as part of a tribe in this sort of manner, is hoping they can escape having to be responsible in their self-care. It's understandable. Think of a kid getting close to maturation. They don't like the idea of now being a grown-up. Like, oh, I want to stay as a young child still. So it's kind of a natural response. But there you go. They got their, we got our wish. We managed to escape the responsibilities of life so that we can remain forever children. And now the ripple effect. Whew, I told you it's going to be a long stream. So I'll try and speak a bit faster. All right. So poor boundaries propagate contagion, and anxiety bleeds into comorbidity across the communities. So, as you'd expect, emotional instability causes massive mayhem and disruption. It's hard to imagine how any of this would really be conducive over a long period of time. And so we've got a state of continually putting out fires, addressing crisis after crisis. But that's okay, because this builds, it's the guise of productivity. So that creates a false sense of security. We need to have crisis after crisis, otherwise it's unsettling. How you want to argue that as being healthy? Obviously it's not. But it feels good. It feels reassuring. And that's what's matter. Your feelings are more important than what's healthy. But this putting out the fire, creating a security, a false sense, also helps to reinforce denial that there is anything deeply wrong. Nah, there's nothing wrong here. Just a few, bumps and bruises, a few tussles. Yeah, we're all good. Meanwhile, someone in the back is saying, "Billy, shut the F up." So you'll notice nothing really ever changes, and that's the point. It's not supposed to change. Trauma is trying to keep things in an equilibrium of frozen time, frozen childhood. We're all in cryostasis, trapped in the traumatic nightmare, in a loop, frozen in time. So this is the so because nothing ever changes, this is kind of like a built-in handicap in the system of management, which causes it to be maladaptive. No matter how many solutions and attempts, and this is what we should do, how many times you should redefine things, gatekeeping, whatever protocols, it's built in to be maladaptive. None of it's going to work. It will all backfire because that is the point. The trauma is designed in such a way to protect you even against your tampering. Any of your solutions is tampering this trauma regime. So it's deliberately maladaptive. It's deliberately ignorant to things that would help them. If it's like the self-love, for example, what does it do with that? It converts it and identifies it as enemy. So it's very rigid. It's very stubborn. This bubble it tries to be a hard shell. So this is a fail-safe mechanism. It's kind of clever in a way. It's a fail-safe mechanism to prevent you undoing something by accident with good intentions. Now, with the survival element mode activated, threat assessment is all wonky. People get persecuted when maybe they shouldn't, and manipulators get in and they become protected. So this is why safe gatekeeping it's not effective, and it could be causing more harm than good because you're locking yourself in with your abuser. So manipulators are very, I think we're moving into like external. Yeah, we're going to be moving into the external. Manipulators are very good at leveraging these blind spots, these vulnerabilities. Like the manipulator, they know how to spin the lies and increase the anxiety. They know how to ramp things up, making you more and more vulnerable, and they can slip in and take control. So until you've addressed these personal issues that you like to keep in the dark and be avoidant of, you don't even know where they are, you've hidden them from yourself, you can never have healthy boundaries. So therefore you can never really gatekeep, and predators will always continue to get in. And why so? Because these communities put a big banner up saying, come join us, we're a place where we take care of you. And that's exactly what the predators want. They want you to take care of them. So you'll notice you'll get certain people who don't seem to really want to progress. You're like, they seem to be a drain. Well, I'm going to go into this more detail actually further down. So so if a conversation about gatekeeping is coming up, that's a telltale sign that you are so severely compromised in your mental stability, I'm afraid. Like, maggots don't appear unless the area is already infected and unclean. And it's no accident. This ain't some weird cosmic thing that many people have the same kind of experiences with their ex-partners. That kind of eerily similar stories. But unfortunately, having that same experience creates an additional bond, i.e. a trauma bond. All right, so the appeal to, let's take have a little breather. I know there's a lot to take in. Seraphim, good to see you. Successful Endeavors, good to see you, sir. Right. The appeal to outsiders. So the vulnerable sufferer, the one who genuinely needs sort of help. So unfortunately, they're not really coming with the. They might be, but a lot of the times they're looking for an out. They're looking for an escape. So, and these communities are offering that opportunity of offloading responsibility and granting a person a status of victimhood. Like, and then that person is given free reign, the privileges, they're given sympathy, they got entitlement, like victimhood, victimizing, victim, the card victim. You know, it's a very powerful. It's a power play, if utilized in the ways that that have been. You know, you are untouchable, privileged, whilst you are also morally correct. But communities kind of invite it. So, because if communities said we don't want that here, we don't want people to have victim, don't be coming to us with victim status, then those people wouldn't enter, right? They'd be gatekept. So this is a catch-22. This is a contradiction again, because it's like we want injured people to come here, but we don't want them to be injured. You know? But that's one. That section of people, they come to communities. Predators come to the community. But why? Why? Because you are fuel and you are supply. It's a cafeteria of supply, and they're all easy targets. They're not gaining access. Like, I kind of see this being said. Get this egotism out of your head. They're not gaining access because you're all cool dudes and everyone wants to be like you. All right. No, it is because, and it is a sign of injured people are here. That's what the predators want. You know, they might try and moonlight as if they're the virtuous superior one, but it is no. They just want fuel and supply. Apart from the possible financial gain, you know, your distress and the ease at which they can control you makes them feel powerful and provides them with reassurance. And if you've got any self-esteem, they try and take what little self-esteem you may have, just like taking candy from a baby. So it's all this vulnerability stuff is what's creating instability and the opportunity. And people aren't going to be able to recover or do any self-work if they were inclined to do it. If their energies are being transactioned and redirected. But again, the ego wants there to be transactions. It wants to buy its way through life. Just a quick remark about so because the trauma is rejecting, like you want there to be peace. Like emotionally, you want there to be peace and contentment and happiness, but cognitively, the other way around. Cognitively, you know having peace is logically the good thing, and being content is logically a good thing, but emotionally, you're being pulled towards that more, which is telling you, no, we need to fight. But that's creating this uncomfortable feeling of dissonance. That's why there's a split. You're in two minds. You don't know what's to do. You become paralyzed because you can't make up your mind, and you're occupied with this internal conflict. And this causes more distress, more problems. And it's hard for you to formulate a sense of self, because where are you in this schism, this splitting? So we've got compounded issues. And there's another group. This one's going to be a funny one. The outside, right? The appeal to outsider people. We're still dealing with that. There's a group of people. They're more kind of predatory. They want in, but they don't manage to get in. They're excluded. In my notes here, I couldn't be. I was getting exhausted, so I was just call them wackos. All right, so the total wackoids, they won't be let in because the tribe is also shame avoidant. If you've got someone who's complete nutter, it's not going to look good on the tribe. So these wackadoodles bring too much shame, and ultimately they become a liability. The Fruity Loops will want in and complain how victimized they are whilst being highly passive aggressive, wanting to insult the people who they claim to want to help and save. And they will continue to be on the fringe. So where tribe members may accidentally and unconsciously congregate, the wackoids intentionally want to be a blight on the tribe's limited resources and drain them dry. So this is why they won't be allowed into a tribe, because they're a liability and they're too much of a drain. And other exclusions will generally fall into categories of basically incompatible, or cause a detriment to the appearance, the image of the tribe. So image is another important feature, because a lot of this is the illusion, is the doublespeak, is the double life, is the mask of trying to overlay a fantasy on top of reality and claiming it can pass mustard. Is that right way of saying it, the expression? It's trying to say it's the real deal, it's the legit thing, it's trying to palm it off as fake gold. So it needs appearance, the narratives. These are the kind of things to convince you that your lie is real. So that's another kind of topic we'll cover. Now, healthy people, in contrast, they don't require sustaining like this on this kind of level with these sort of things, and they'll generally know to stay away. They turn up authentic, they maintain their integrity, their independence, their individualism. They have more honesty. They're not fake virtue. They also have the perspective to see what's going on a lot better, because they can control their ego. They can also make better decisions. They suffer less from things like suicidal ideation, depression, loneliness. Healthy people with their boundaries, they organically gatekeep They don't even, it's autopilot. It's not even really their immune system is working effectively enough to take care of them. So they got a lot more mental faculty available to them, because with what we've been covering, no wonder people struggle to get their, they feel depleted. They got so much to deal with. So healthy people they kind of have a bit more, not to rub it in people's faces, but like a bit more grace, because they're not being bombarded with all these stressors. They have the luxury and ability to actually enjoy life a lot more, because of a better head start, shall we put it. And so as a result, predators have a hard time trying to manipulate or work them. So healthy people, you want to protect yourself from predators and manipulators. If you're healthy, that's a lot easier, because the trolls go for easy targets. So if you've got trolls hassling you or something like this, it's because you're an easy target. It's because you're very unhealthy. If you've had a bad relationship and you want to call the ex-partner a crazy so-and-so, it's because you're also crazy so-and-so. Sorry. Like, hurt people hurt others. Like, a healthy person with a unhealthy person would not be compatible. The healthy person would end up being too toxic for the unhealthy person. They would kill them. So when looking for a spouse, if you were honest enough, it was because you yourself were unhealthy. I don't necessarily mean like, you're crazy and you're whatever, but I mean, it's just like you got like the blue pill sort of neglectful. You didn't realize that you were easily tricked. You were a bit naive. You're gullible. So don't be too offended, but that's unhealthy, and as such, you're looking for someone who you can integrate with. They have to be compatible. That means they have to also be unhealthy. And in terms of other external factors, societies are built from people, from individuals. So it's kind of like the snake eating its own tail. It's easy to say like, oh, the laws, the government, these other sectors, they're the one. That's why men or whoever is getting a hard time. Yes, that's sort of, it's like a yes and no. Like, yes, it doesn't help, but you're not doing yourself any favors either. And if you're going to continue blaming out external sources like that to such an extent, then you're never going to be able to address your own issues. You're basically saying, I need other people in order to make me feel happy, and like, I can't have a life because it's up to other people. It's up to the government if I can have a life. It's up to the laws. It's like, no, like, I mean, yes, it can be a inconvenience, shall we say? I mean, it can be very detrimental, but that's also part of life. The point is that you don't give up. I just don't bother try. And I don't mean that means going back to the plantation. It means don't kill your ambition, your desire, and become a turn your heart to stone, become a snob. So a lot of the conversations that are taking place recently, it's not really trying. They say they want to try and solve problems, they want to save lives and things like that, but really, what's happening is there is an elephant in the room. It's been swept under the rug, and now it's become a bit of a problem. So these conversations are basically like, where can we hide this elephant now? You're just shuffling the problem around instead of addressing it. You know. And so all these conversations of like gatekeeping, tenants, manifestos, trolling, hocus pocus, all of this sort of stuff isn't going to protect you from your own self-harm and sabotage derived from your traumas, from your ego's trauma that you want to continue mucking around with. Okay, maybe this is another sort of okay, revelation time. So maybe now, upon realizing that this entity, this banner of virtue, this trophy, whatever, isn't really anything special. What really is special is you, the true self, the true version of you is what's special. So you need to reevaluate its value, because where it stands currently, it's been devalued. You've traded it in favor of a false self, pretending to be someone who you are not really. So that's a tough one. But the entity isn't really special. And it's certainly not a replacement for your own self-care. And as this safety net slowly dissolves, because it cannot last and it won't sustain you, it actually takes from you, you know. But what it gives you in return is that false, it validates that false self, further duping you. And it also gives you an alternative way of living life by escaping life. So some of you instinctually, because you're very guided by your survival instinct, so there will be part of that hypervigilance will signal to you a feeling that you can sense this isn't sustainable. You can sense it's going to collapse. And trauma, sort of with its own conscious, knows that it needs assistance. It needs a plan B. So you can feel the inadequacies. And some people are reaching towards religion now. Or a good one is, we're going to head over to Rumble. Or a different community altogether. Or maybe women. Where whatever plan B this is, backup safety net, is where you're going to take your baggage with you and basically repeat the cycle. You've drained the resources of YouTube, for example, so you're going to go over to Rumble now and do the same stuff over there until it's been depleted. Moving the elephant around the room. So you don't know how long the ship you're currently on is going to stay afloat. So you need another ship to jump to, another ship in a different pond. And this is part of the avoidance we were talking about. Now I've got a little section here about women and why the obsession and fascination and etc. But maybe I'll save that for a different stream. Because I'm getting tired, and I'm sure you guys are getting tired of listening to me. So okay, we're actually hitting the conclusion part now. So I haven't. Now this is going to be a bit. I haven't abandoned MGTOW. I mean, I don't even recognize myself as a MGTOW. I've never, for the record, I've never labeled myself as one. I've always said I will stand with them, but I don't know if I am one or not. But I'm not going to call myself one. Anyway, it's not me. I haven't abandoned the men's community or survivor group communities. It's quite the contrary. I'm rejecting this egos, traumas, manifestation of an entity monster that is sucking the souls of everyone who believes it will look after them. It is that which I reject. I reject the delusion. Delusion is protection. So the ones who are enablers of such a thing, they're the ones who have done the abandoning. You abandon your true self. And you elicited the help of the ego, of this entity. You are the ones who have turned your back, not on the world, but on you. And that's what really, truly matters. So you will never be able to have a sense of self if you're hiding from yourself. And this mask and emptiness, it tells me there is still a spirit there that you're trying to hide. It's not dead yet. So in a way, like really, people don't need to have this MGTOW or the philosophy rammed down their throat. That's only if you're trying to keep them with affirmations, keep them under this other guise. Again, I'm not rejecting it. I still believe there is still a real reason for it, but it's not what is claimed. Like simply living your life and pursuing your dreams is the model that inspires other people. It's not a competition of intellectual rationalizing. MGTOW is the spirit of man holding the hand of the inner child, the parental figure looking after himself, being there, seeing himself. So where are you? Because instead of showing that inner child some compassion and being there, instead you want to try and fight against him, and you don't want to be reminded that he even exists. But like, no matter how much you try and push him away, really, it is him that has the resilience. He knows the truth, and he's been there all along. So you are the one who abandoned him, not I. And that's the legacy as it stands. So accept who you are, even if you don't know who that is yet. You can reunite by mourning through the grieving process. You can mourn the loss of innocence. You say sorry for not being there. And in that way, you can finally validate the inner child can be finally validated and be seen by you, be recognized by you, and accepted by you with unconditional love. You have reunited, and now you are whole. And that's the fulfillment that you're missing. And that's the fulfillment you're looking for, trying to substitute it with other things. There is no substitute for your inner child, no matter how hard you try. That is the spirit of MGTOW, in my definition. And through that union, being seen and validated by you instead of rejected, that's all you've ever wanted, really, isn't it? If you're honest with yourself. No one could give it to you but yourself. It's right under you. Well, it's inside you, but it's kind of like it's underneath your nose. It's in your hands. You don't have to go chasing after happiness. It's just it's there within your grasp. If only you knew. If only you didn't think that this would kill you. That's because you keep listening to your ego and the trauma. So don't, it's been there all this time trying to get you to listen, and you've been ignoring it and shutting it down. So choose not to ignore its needs. Be kinder to yourself. And when you do, if or when you should, that kindness will spread and it will be returned to you. That is something I can promise. So let us not pass on our fears, and instead let us pass on our hopes and inspiration. I think this is a much more powerful statement to the world than we are the virtuous. We will choose to be the parents we never had. And I will do what it takes to make myself heal, because that is what I deserve. I owe it to me, not to you or anyone else. That, in my opinion, is a much more stronger, powerful message as a MGTOW man, or like for someone who's MGTOW. So I'm not saying this to belittle MGTOW. No, far from it. I'm trying to make you realize what truly matters. It's not a vehicle for you to run away from and for it to fix your problems. If anything, MGTOW is like the environment in which you face them. So where is it going, really? Is it really escaping the plantation, or is it escaping the world? No, it's going to self, where only self belongs. The plantation ain't welcome there. It's like the fortress of solitude, right? It belongs to you. And note, it belongs to you, not you belong to it. So the good news, I've kind of sprinkled it out. Hopefully, you picked up here and there. But the good news is, if you want things to change, you can choose to be more self-aware, and knowing how things mess you up. So you can start to make things a bit more healthier. And so I hope there'll be more, I hope there'll be, with all that said and done kind of thing, I hope there'll be more signals of genuine desire of wanting to do some true work. and I will know if you are bullshitting me or not. Because I know the lies very well. So you don't need to be lying. You can ease up on yourself and just be more honest. Then we can do something. Then we can work. And remember, because you owe it to yourself as well. And I think we're pretty much wrapping it up there. I'm sure there might be a lot of remarks or questions, or you might require some expanding, some ideas. More than welcome to leave comments or reach out for assistance, and I will go over whatever parts you might want me to you think will help you out. Obviously, there's lots of sections, as we were describing, multi-layered, and how things interact with one another. So it's not a simple, easy click of the finger kind of fix, and it will take time, it'll take effort, it'll take commitment, but it can be broken down and managed. I'll check the comments out. So who managed to stay here all this time? Give yourselves a pat on the back. Oh, I've kind of lost. Can't see. Oh, I have to go to YouTube and look at what the comments are saying. Okay, I see something by Sam here. Hey, Billy, you know I don't agree with a lot of what you said tonight. Okay, and I think you're off base on a lot of it, but you know, man, you really do get me thinking, so I appreciate that. That's fine. That's fine. It's great. Hey, if you're thinking, you don't have to agree, but I did start saying, like, put it in a framework of verifying if it helps, and think of it as if I was describing other communities instead of like a man's community, because if you think I'm talking literally about a man's community, like MGTOW, for example, a defense bias might be like, oh, I ain't gonna let him say that about it, like a blind loyalty. I'm not saying that you need to abandon it or shame on MGTOW sort of thing. No, it is very important. Maybe I might do a separate stream to say why these things are important to have. Or how can I quickly summarize it? They're important because you get vulnerable people. You get people who haven't, they're in their maturation process, so they need some sort of environment. So yes, it's good. We do need assistance, but where it becomes a problem is if you look at like a parenting model as a comparison, where the parent stifles the development of the child. That's where it becomes a problem. And I suppose the other kind of problem is the entity, kind of the herd mentality escalates and it becomes a runaway. So there needs to be some sort of, I suppose in the beginning, an awareness of that happening when a herd mentality, like the crowd psychology, is beginning to take over, when contagion is beginning, because that's a sort of tipping point when things become a bit more problematic. But yeah, Sam, like I'm not angry with you. I'm glad you're not angry with me. Just think about it. If there's particular bits you want to maybe sort of say, like, I don't think you want to have like a counter argument or whatever, more than welcome to. We can have a discussion about it. It'd be fun. This is part of learning, part of exploration. So much appreciated. Okay, I see someone saying like, who created God? Okay, what's it? Okay, fine. You don't want censoring, but what censorship? Or do you mean like want censorship? You don't want censoring, but want censorship? Is that part of a different conversation? Fine. Harrison's you Craig. Oh, okay, Sam. I see something that Sam wrote earlier. So it's not us who have rejected ourselves, but the rest of the world who rejected us. Oh, I can't. I'm looking at the YouTube thing because for some reason StreamYard isn't loading up the comments. I can't put it on the screen for everyone to see it. But yeah, so at Billy, it's not us who have rejected ourselves, but the rest of the world who have rejected us. That if you rewind it back, had we not rejected ourselves, then we wouldn't care if the world rejected us or not, because we wouldn't need the world's validation or acceptance of us, because we had already accepted who we are. So if you're speaking in a way like the world rejected us, as if I need the world to accept me, it's because I currently am not accepting myself. That's why I need the world to accept me, because I'm not doing it. So it's a sensitive, I don't want to say too much because it's quite a sensitive one, but because there's a duality going on as well. It's like, who are we talking about accepting? Are we talking about accepting our true self? Because you're right, we did accept, there was someone that was accepted. Was it the true self, or was it the ego who would substitute the true self? And we will relabel, rebrand, we will declare that is who we are. I am my mask. This fabrication I present to the world, oh yeah, this is the real me. I really am a goat. Like, no, it's a mask, you know? But as a caveat, obviously, everyone, to respect people's individuality, like what is being described here isn't a kind of universal, like, oh, everyone is experiencing the same thing, everyone had the same problems, everyone made the same decisions and came to the same conclusions. Like, some people they'll have zero sense of self. Some people, the sense of self wasn't allowed to maturize and develop. Some is a fragmented, some is a unstable sense of self. Some sometimes you get an inverted sense of self, where it's like you seem a lot older than you are biologically, kind of thing. So it's kind of like you missed out. It's not that you didn't have your childhood, but you've kind of jumped over it and went straight into becoming an old grumpy git at the age of 15. Yeah, older, wiser than beyond your years, or something like that. But yeah, anyway, I'm nattering on. Okay, well, it's late. Thank you for being here. I know it was a tough one. Be good to yourselves. All right. Will it let me end? Oh, damn you, StreamYard. It's kind of like frozen on me. All right, let me jump from one window to another window and come back. All right, the button's there. Okay. All right, bye, everyone. Have a good night.